look at the bleed. Look at that bleed. Like, we don't even have to use Blood Hunt if we don't want to. That bleed just will delete this boss. What is going on, YouTube? Today, I'm going to show you guys why Rake is severely overpowered in Path of Exile 2. Okay, so before we get into the insane DPS, let's go over the items that I'm using or the gear that I'm using for this build, the skill gems, and the passive. So we'll start with the gear. We're using Tangle Tongue. The higher the crit hit chance, the better. I would recommend anything over 24%, but you can get away with a 20% or 23%er. You can get away with pretty much any Tangle Tongue. Any type of Tangle Tongue will work. We're using the Sacred Flame Shrine Scepter. 60% is not required. Anything in this range, the 40 to 60% is fine. I just use it because it gives you the extra fire damage, but a 60% is not required for this build. What is required is the Deepest Tower Spirit Bone Crown Helmet. And the reason why this is required is because of this modifier right here, which is enemies in your presence count as being on low life. That is what this entire build is structured around. And so the better the helmet, the Deepest Tower helmet you can get, the better your chances are of having a good build with this setup. I have 19 Chaos Res and 95 max life. It's not the greatest, it's not max rolled or any of that nature. It's just an average Deepest Tower, but the better the mods, the better the setup. The amulet, we are going with plus level to all melee skills. The spirit is not required. Dexterity, we want some type of attribute on this amulet, and then we also want some type of critical hit chance and or critical hit damage. I went with critical hit chance, but damage will work just as well. This plus level to all melee skills is required because we need to increase the level of our Rake ability. So I would recommend getting +2. If you can afford a +3, then a +3. The body armor we're using is triple res, max life. That kind of speaks for itself. We want evasion and energy shield split. You don't necessarily need evasion energy shield split. You could just go only evasion, but you cannot go only energy shield. We need to get evasion off of our chest piece. And so I decided to go with the EV-ES split. I like having some type of energy shield. With life remnants and a high life pool, you don't necessarily need any energy shields because life remnants gives you 100% of your effective life. And so when I get full stacks of life remnants, I have just over 3,600 life. So energy shield is not necessarily needed. However, I just like having it. But we do need the evasion. So again, evasion only chest piece would work, but I prefer having an EV-ES split. On one of our rings, we have triple added damage and some of our reses. We also are stacking attributes a little bit, nothing crazy, but we do want some attributes on our rings. The other ring is double additive damage, or 2 additive damages, and increased rarity. And again, we're stacking attributes. And I'll explain why we're going to be stacking attributes, but we do want to stack our attributes, specifically strength. Intelligence is 50-50. You can use it, but it's not necessarily required. And dexterity is probably just as important as strength is. The other thing that we're using is energy shield boots. Higher the energy shield, the better. Again, you could probably go with evasion only boots. If you have max life on your boots and you have evasion only, that's perfectly fine. I like having energy shields. Some people don't necessarily need it. Stacking evasion boots might even be better for this build than just energy shield, but I like having energy shield. I do opt to go for rarity on top of the double res. And that's because I don't have rarity on one of my rings, so I want to try to get as much rarity as I can off of my boots and my gloves. My rarity at the moment is 72%, but I would like to get that a little bit higher. I do have to switch out this ring with a different one that doesn't have fire res. I want one that has just cold res and chaos res. So I gotta find a ring. That's part of the reason why my reses aren't necessarily fully capped, but once I switch the ring out, this will still stay capped, and then this will be at 75%. Right now, this mapping setup feels good. It feels strong. It does feel tanky. Like I said, you get 3,600 life on top of the 700 energy shield as you're collecting these life remnants. So this build setup is pretty tanky for mapping. For the gloves, we do need the plus level to all melee skills. I would say that that is another requirement. Again, we're just trying to stack as much levels to our rake as we possibly can. We have double additive damage. We also have dexterity because we're stacking attributes, and we have the increased rarity. The increased rarity is personal preference. I like having more rarity because I want to find more stuff when I'm mapping, or better stuff when I'm mapping. So I opted to go for increased rarity on my gloves. The ingenuity belt is personal preference. It's not needed. It's not a requirement. If you have a headhunter, you can use a headhunter. If you really want to, you can use like a utility belt with double or triple additive or triple res to help with any type of res caps. I thought about switching this out with a utility belt that had cold res, so I didn't have to get another ring. It's an option. It's not required. Life and Mana Flask are personal preference. You don't need, this build doesn't require you to have insane amount of Life Flask charges, so I'm using the unique Life Flask, and the charms are all personal preference. Now that we've been over the gear, let's take a look at the skill gems that I'm using. We'll start with Life Remnants. I'm using Dissipate, Precision, Magnetism, and Interlude. Now, mind you, all of this is going to be in a Mobalytics in the description below. We're using Lightning Spear for mapping only. We have Fork, Martial Tempo, Bolt, Innervate, and Perpetual Charge. Martial Tempo is important because we're not using any skill speed additive skill speed on our passive tree. So the more attack speed you can get, the better from your support gems. So that's the reason why we're using Martial Tempo. Frostwall, I'll go over why Frostwall isn't required, but is a nice thing to have. So we'll skip that for now. Herald of Thunder, that's for mapping as well. We have Maim, Long Shot, Neural Overload, Electrocute, and Close Combat. Wind Dancer for the extra evasion. Blasphemy, we are using Enfeeble, Ritualistic Curse, Magnified Effect, Heightened Curse, and Encumbrance. You don't necessarily need to use Enfeeble. You could use Temp Chains if you want. I like using Enfeeble because this build, when you're mapping, you typically kill stuff before it gets to you. And so, like, if a monster ends up getting to you, I prefer them to have less damage than for them to have slower movement speed and or attack speed. So that's why I'm using Enfeeble. Blasphemy is definitely a requirement because in our passive skill tree, we have the Blood Barbs node, which states that bleeding you inflict on cursed targets is aggravated. This build works really well because of the fact that Blasphemy is cursing our targets as we're working through mapping, and it also works when you're doing bossing as well. So Blasphemy is important for this build. I would highly recommend using it. You could self-cast the Enfeeble, but that's just adding more steps to your bossing. So I choose not to do it. I find that I curse the bosses that I am attacking anyways. Blasphemy works really well. in that instance, and it just kind of skips a step or skips a click that I don't have to do. Our rake, which is level 26, mind you, I am only level 89, so this will jump up to level 27 when I get to level 90 because I'll be able to use the level 20 skill gem. On our rake, we're using heavy swing, ambrosia, primal armament, deep cuts, and concentrated effect. And if you look on our rake ability, you can see this line here, which is main hand estimated bleeding damage per second. Right now it's at 83, the top end is just under 8,300. I'm going to show you guys how we're going to get that to just under 10,000. And that'll be when we take a look at the passive tree. But for now, this is the mapping side of it. It is at 8,300, which is pretty good for just mapping. We're using Infernal Cry. On our Infernal Cry, we have Premeditation, Raging Cry, Enraged War Cry, Ingenuity, and Second Wind. Now, the reason that we're trying to stack Strength a little bit is because we want to have a higher level Infernal War Cry. The reasoning why we want a higher level Infernal War Cry is because the higher the level, the increased Warcry speed, the higher the increased Warcry speed. And that is important because when we're going to do bossing, we just want to be able to click and just do 2 Warcries back to back. And so that's part of the reason why, or that is the reason why we're stacking strength, because you need a pretty high amount of strength to get a high level Warcry. So that's why. We have Blood Hunt, and on our Blood Hunt, we're using Blindside, Immolate, Heft, Elemental Focus, and Physical Mastery. And then we're using Stormlance. Stormlance is strictly used for bossing, and on our Stormlance, we are using Blind, Overextend, Deliberation, Execute, and Persistence. And that is how we are having our skill gems set up. We have 100% main hand critical hit chance and 403% critical damage bonus. Alrighty, so now that we've gone through the skills and the gear, let's take a look at our passive tree. So for our Ascendancy, we're going with Gore Spike, Blood Barbs, which you talked about earlier. I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm not going to. The Life Remnants, the one that grants Life Remnants as a skill, and Grasping Wounds. If I zoom this out, you can kind of see we're heading right off into the upper right direction. We're going for all these crit hit chance and crit damage bonus nodes. And we're going for the attack damage nodes as well. Outside of the crit, evasion, and attack damage, we want to hit these 3 green lines. These give ailment damage. So, for example, this one has 30% increased damage with hits against enemies affected by ailments, and then 15% increased duration of damaging ailments on enemies. These 2 are very important. Same with this one, because this one has an increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict. Damaging ailments being the bleeding. We're also going with the finishing blows and the stars aligned, because with the helmet and the enemies in your presence count as being on low life, these essentially give you increased damage with hits against enemies that are on low life. So we're getting 60%. We're also getting lucky with the hits that we are dealing to the enemies that are on low life. We're getting 30%, 30%, 30%, 30%, and then 120% over here. We did pick up a few damage nodes with our spears. These nodes here increase our... let's take a look at this. These nodes here will increase, if you take a look at this, it'll increase our bleeding damage per second. So the increased damage with spears does make a pretty big effect on our overall damage. Now, because I'm only level 89, what I do for bossing, which is completely optional, but it does increase the damage output when you're bossing. So to get that 65 million damage, you kind of have to set it up a little bit like this. Our evasion is at 57 with full Wind Dancer stacks. We don't need evasion when we're bossing, so I'm going to pull these out like this, including these two, which you can probably keep these two if you want. And I'm going to add them in here. And then we're going to pick up this node here. And this long distance relationship node will give us a 30% increased presence area of effect. Now, granted, we get another 10% from the second node, so we do get 40% increased presence from these two nodes. This one's not really doing much of anything because we're not running a companion. And this is how I like to set up when I'm doing bossing. It works pretty well. The higher the level I get, the more I could just fill this out and not have to worry about moving these around. These aren't necessarily needed for mapping. I like to go with the higher evasion. This isn't needed for mapping, this extra 30% damage. Neither is this one. So that's part of the reason why I move them around, because these aren't needed at all when you're doing mapping, but the higher evasion is needed. That's why if you're okay with not having energy shield, you could just go with a really high evasion rating chest piece. Truthfully, if I wasn't so stubborn with just having a little bit of energy shield, I do think that a really high evasion chest piece would probably be better for this build than the evasion and ES split. But I like having energy shield, and I can make the build work without having 70, 65% evasion. Only having 57 still works for me. As for the jewels, what we're rocking with is we want max roll increase attack damage, and then max roll increase magnitude of bleeding you inflict. We don't need the gain rage. We don't necessarily need the fire damage, and we don't need the stun threshold. That is just what I'm rocking with. We are using a From Nothing diamond with the unwavering stance. That goes over here, so we can pick up these nodes. The finality node, which is the one that gives you 120% increased damage. And then this is something that I picked up. This is the Prism of Belief diamond. This isn't necessary for one-shotting T4 pinnacle bosses. I picked it up because I wanted to test how it worked, and I mean, it does perform better than another one of these nodes. And the reason why is because when we gain our 2 levels from that, we're going from 237 attack damage to 267 attack damage. So we do get a 30% buff from those 2 levels. Again, it's not needed or it's not required for the build. I just have it because I want to try it out and I didn't mind using it. I have done pretty good damage, just as good damage with this build without this rake or the Prism of Belief diamond plus 2 level to all rake skills. So that's why I'm saying it's not a requirement at all. So the last thing before we get into the bossing, and I can show you guys just how well this build works, let's go over why Frostwall is a recommendation. Not a necessity, but it definitely is a recommendation. So if you guys are having trouble with being on low life and maybe you're getting one shot by pinnacle bosses, what Frostwall does is it gives you these ice crystals, and These ice crystals, when you break them, can give you life remnants. And so it's a kind of like a cheesy way. If you notice, if I break these and I go to pick up the life remnants, you can see how my life just jumped right there. So when you're going in and trying to like prep for a boss, you can kind of spam these out real quick and just pick them up and increase your life to whatever your max life would be with life remnants. So for me, it's about 3,600. So that is not a requirement for the build, but it definitely is a recommendation. I like using it. It just kind of helps with the ease of mind because it does double your life and basically makes it so you can't get one shot for most bosses. Now, again, most bosses do have some sort of one shot mechanic, so it just helps with overall, how much damage you take during boss fights. So now that we've moved around our passive tree to do our bossing setup, we can start with, we're going to start with King in the Mist. Now, like I said before, the higher the level you go, the less moving around you're going to have to do. I'd say the optimal level is probably like 93, 94. But again, I'm only level 89 as of this moment. So we're going to have to move some passes around when we're bossing. So right when you come into the King in the Mist, mind you, this is tier 4. Let me just show you guys. This is tier 4. You have the 8 of 8 points. And right as you come in, this is like the opportune moment to where you can cast a bunch of these frost walls, just break them, and you can stack your life. We're also going to just quickly throw a few of these lances down, because when we walk over there, the boss is going to have energy shield, and we want to break the energy shield before we attack him. So we're just going to spam these down real quick, and we're going to walk over to him. We're going to double hit War Cry. You guys can see just how much damage. That's without Blood Hunt. That was 15 million damage without Blood Hunt. The rake on this build is absolutely insane. It's easy one shot for all pinnacle bosses. So we walk in, we're gonna do the same thing. You can see his energy shield came up. We're just gonna spam like 3 of these. We're gonna double tap a War Cry, and then we're gonna rake him. And look at the bleed. Look at that bleed. Like, we don't even have to use Blood Hunt if we don't want to. That bleed just will delete this boss. It is quite insane how much damage that bleed does on like all the pinnacle bosses. And again, I think I showed this, but I want to go over this. This is tier 4. So we made it to the end. We have our full life remnant stacks. And let me show you guys. This is a T4 Breachstone, T4 Zesh.
We that dreamed, we in nightmare.
We're just gonna wait. I'm gonna throw down a 2 Storm Lances, 3, double tap War Cry, and hit her one time. That bleed is just insane. Can we kill her? No, we can't kill her with only bleed. But we did so much bleed damage right there. You just can't fail. As long as you hit your Blood Hunt, you just cannot fail to kill this boss. By far the easiest boss kill I've had of any build, truthfully. So as you guys can see, this build performs really well against single target bosses or single target enemies. I really enjoyed using this. The mapping aspect is pretty good. We can jump into a map real quick. I don't think I showed the map on the video, so we'll just jump into a random map. Now, mind you, before we jumped into this map, we did switch our attack nodes back to our evasion nodes. So we have all these evasion nodes. As soon as we get higher level, we will be able to kind of fill this out a little bit more nicely. All I would really say, these 30% nodes aren't a huge requirement. So being at level 89, I really would like the 4 levels to get up to this prolonged assault, and so that'll put me about 93. So 93, 94 is probably going to be the optimal level for this build, but it still works at level 88. You just have to remember to move your nodes around. This is a level 15 or Waystone 15 tier 15 map, and we're just moving around killing stuff. This build works really well. We constantly have our life remnants charges, so we don't really lose a lot of life. 57 evasion works well. I think if there was anything I would change about this, I would potentially go with a higher evasion chest piece, or just an evasion only chest piece. But I'm stubborn and I like having some energy shield. I don't think this has a map boss, but you guys can see, or you guys already saw how well it does against single target, so I think the map boss isn't necessarily needed. Mapping on this build is super fun, super Cadillac. Doesn't require, it's very mindless like any other Lightning Spear builds. I think it just kind of speaks for itself. One shots all the enemies in this tier 15 map. So there you have it. This is the Blood Mage Bleed Rake build that I have made. Now, I don't want to say that I made it myself. I'm sure someone else might have made this before me. I don't ever believe that I have an original thought when it comes to this game. However, I haven't been able to find anyone who are using this setup, so maybe I could take credit, maybe I can't. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. This is a great build regardless. If you guys have any questions about the build, please leave them in the comments. I spent quite a bit of time making this build as good as it is, kind of perfecting it, min-maxing and all that fun stuff. So a like on the video would be appreciated. If I can get 50 likes on this video, I will show you guys how well this performs on a tier 4 Arbiter. Also, if you can subscribe and swing over to our Twitch channel, we do stream pretty much every day. I have the schedule linked over on my page in Twitch, so you guys can kind of see when I do and don't stream. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, any questions are welcome in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.